Building a bed frame. Alright, so in this video I'll be showing you how I made my California king size bed frame. And I started off with cutting the common pine board which I used for the sides of the bed. And I used these 1x2 pieces for the bed slats so that it won't be too heavy. And for the bottom of the bed I just used 3/4 inch plywood. And this bed frame is pretty much broken into 3 different parts, and I'm starting off with the base of the bed. And I used 2x4s for the corners to attach the plywood to. The next step was creating a hole in some of the center pieces to where a center beam would fit through to make the bed frame more stable. And I used a chisel to get out some of the pieces. And in order to hide some of the bottom part of the bed frame, I used black because I didn't want it to be seen that much. And the next part of the project was working on the side panels, which I did want to become visible. And again, I used black paint for the edges just because I really like that contrast look. And the last part of the project was making the headboard, and I used these 2x4 pieces as posts, and I would attach these 1x6 common board pieces. And I had to do this part section by section using clamps in order to eliminate the space in between the boards, because even though they come stock, they still are a little bit uneven, and you have to clamp it down to eliminate the spaces in between. Then after the boards are pretty even, I attached 2 more posts to make it more secure. After that was done, I sanded down the whole entire headboard, and I used wood conditioner to prep the wood, and I used Ipswich pine stain to stain the headboard, and eventually used the satin finish to protect the wood, and of course coating the edges black. Now to put it all together. So assembling the bottom part of the frame is essentially like putting together a really big cube. You just clamp the edges and you just screw in the sides. And the challenge was putting together that center piece because you need a good amount of pressure to secure it in. And the way I did that was I had to flip it on its side and really just lean my body weight into it to get the screws into the wood. And probably the most important part and the source of this whole bed frame stability is the center beam, and I used the hammer to keep it really snug. And the next part was creating the bed slats, and in order to keep the spacing pretty even, I used a pre-cut piece of wood and used it to line up each slat and lined it up like that. And after that, I put the slats on top of the bed frame, made sure it was even, and screwed the slats onto the bed frame. And I did this from the sides, and I had to do it even into the center beam to make it even more secure and make sure it doesn't move around. But even after that, I wanted to add more stability to the bed frame, so I ended up just making these cross beams underneath the bed frame, and that's what really made it really stable. Next was adding in these side panels that I showed staining earlier to the sides of the bed. And after installing it, it would give it this somewhat floating kind of look, and I had to add in these brackets to secure it even more. So in order not to waste the trimmings that I had from the bed slats that I made earlier, I had this idea to put them together, to glue them and clamp it down to make shelving out of it. I sanded it down and cut the edges off to make a nice square out of the panels, and it gave it this pretty cool multicolor wood look to it. And I used golden pecan stain to make it stand out a little bit different than the headboard. And definitely the most complicated part of the project was installing the shelving. And the best way I could describe it was creating a box with missing one of the walls, but clamping it in a very specific way to make it somehow fit and screw it into the headboard. But eventually, after a trial and error, I made it work. The final part of the project was installing the headboard to the actual bed frame, and the way I had to do this was essentially lean my body against the wall and use my legs to press up against the headboard to really make it secure. And the last part, of course, is adding the final touches with the black stain. Now I had a few last ideas of hiding the black brackets by using the leftover trimmings from the shelving, and I just screwed it on top of the black brackets. And lastly, I am all about no waste, and I took these odd trimmings from the shelving, and I remember putting it on top of the shelf and thinking it looked pretty interesting. So what I decided to do was to glue it and put it on top of the shelf. And that is it. Alright, hope you enjoyed the video. Give it a thumbs up if you like. Subscribe if you want to see new content, and we'll see you next time.